Hello, chess fans. Welcome to another episode of Chess Chat, a program brought to you live from the Rollstone Bank and Trust Studio at Fitchburg Access Television. I am George Marigenian, Program Director of the Wachusett Chess Club at Fitchburg State University. This club, the second oldest chess club in Massachusetts, meets every Wednesday evening from 6:30 to 10:30 in rooms 143 and 145 of the McKay Campus Complex at the university. And with me for this episode of Chess Chat is once again our award-winning director, Darren Dame of Fitchburg. He was the recipient of FATV's prestigious Boulder Award in 2009 and has been directing Chess Chat for the past 17 and a half years since our debut in October 2006. And assisting him in the control room and also on camera is a fellow resident and longtime Wachusett Chess Club member, Brian Bigelow. And sitting across from me is a special co-host for this episode of Chess Chat, a co-host who did this some years ago, Mike Camiso of Brookline, New Hampshire. Hello, Mike.
Good evening, George. How are you?
Great having you back.
Thanks.
Now, why are you here instead of my regular co-host, Dave Kuchar?
Dave is on a long trip to upstate Vermont for the solar eclipse today.
Oh, really? So he would put a solar eclipse ahead of chess?
You know, once in a while he gets a little extra.
So I guess we can't blame him.
No.
He took advantage of a solar eclipse to leave Fitchburg and go to see a solar eclipse. Well, again, we want to welcome you again.
Appreciate
I want to tell our viewers that you are a key member of the Wachusett Chess Club. You direct our tournaments, our nationally rated, our U.S. Chess Federation tournaments at the club. You organize tournaments at the club. As far as we now are doing once a month for the time being, tournaments on a Saturday at the McKay complex, and we have one coming up April 20th. Yeah.
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
Hopefully people come.
Okay. Well, Mike, we actually have a great pleasure and an honor this time for this program of Chess Chat of having a very well-known chess player, known coast to coast for his chess playing and also his chess writings, and that is none other than international master James Rizzitano, affectionately known as Jim. Hello, Jim. How are you, Jim?
Hi, George. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Jim. How are you?
Jim,
Good, thanks.
We had Jim, I think 3 years ago, because you had written your sixth book, chess book. It was called Modern Chess Opening Repertoire for White.
Correct, yeah.
And you were here actually in person for that program, which back then was only a half hour long. But now we have an hour with you. Yeah. So we're going to have more fun this time, Jim.
I'm
Now,
looking forward to it, George.
I want you to tell our viewers something. So those of you, we have viewers, repeat viewers naturally, but we have new viewers who know nothing about Jim Rizzitano. What can you tell our viewers about Jim Rizzitano? I mean, tell us something about you. All right, here's a question. When did you learn chess? At what age did you learn chess?
So, George, I learned when I was 11. I was watching the Fischer-Spassky match in the fall of 1972 and learned to play chess. It was watching that match. And then I played in a couple scholastic tournaments in the fall. And then I didn't play for about a year. And then in 1974, I played in some more scholastic tournaments. And that's where it started. And then in 1976, I won the National Junior High Championship in Waltham, beating Joel Benjamin, future GM and U.S. champion, and also future IM Jonathan Yedidia in that tournament. And there was another future GM and U.S. champion in that tournament too, Michael Wilder, though I didn't play him. So I had won that tournament in 1976, and then 1979, I won the National High School Championship in Philadelphia, and that's kind of how things started.
Okay, and in the following year, 1980, I learned that actually you went and you played in the U.S. Open, but you won the U.S. Open U.S. Open, U.S. Speed Championship in Atlanta, Georgia. Did you not?
Oh, that's right, George. Yes. So I won the U.S. Open Speed Championship. I had, I think, 17 and a half out of 18. I drew the last round against, I believe it was William Martz.
Okay, International Master William Martz, Bill
Yep.
Martz.
To win the tournament. Yep.
Okay, and then you started winning the Massachusetts State Championship, the Massachusetts Open. I think in 1981, you won your
Right.
first.
So 1981, I think, was the first time, and then that was George. I think not sure if it was Memorial Day then or if it was around Easter weekend. I think it might have been Easter weekend then.
Yes, it was back then.
And,
Actually, in the 80s, it was actually held in April. It was actually not held in the Memorial Day weekend, but that was later. Yeah.
Right. And then later that summer in 1981, I made my first IM norm at the CCA, Continental Chess Association, the Summer International in New York City. So that was at the Bar Point Club that Bill Koichberg had that was on 14th Street and I think 6th Avenue, just on the edge of Greenwich Village.
All right, and then you actually 2 years after 81, I think you won it 2 years later. The Mass Open.
1 year later, 1982, I won the tournament.
Okay.
So that was the second norm. And then, make a long story short, I had to get a round robin norm to get the title. So I think I had 6 Swiss system norms. I needed a round robin norm. That came in 1985 at the Windy City International in Chicago. I tied for first with Vince McCambridge. I didn't lose a game. And who else was in that? I think GM Ray Keane from England was in there, and IM Lawrence Day from Canada was in there. A few other players, but that was the third. That was the round robin norm I needed. So then I got the title at the FIDE Congress in fall of that year, the fall of 1985.
85. Okay.
September, October, whenever they had it. Yep.
Now, you must remember you're coming to Leominster and Fitchburg, playing actually in tournaments back in the even the 70s. I remember because I've known you as a teenager. I've known you for at least 40 years. When you started
so the
playing.
first one was probably the either the Central New England Spring Open or Fall Open. I want to say, George, it was the Central New England Fall Open in 1975, possibly. But that was when you were having 2 tournaments a year there, and Stefan Grzadowicz was so ably directing them, and the old Holiday Inn there.
At the Holiday Inn in
Nestled
Leominster.
on the hill in Leominster. I think it's a assisted living facility
That's
now.
what
or
it is
something,
now,
right?
assisted living facility, right?
So, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. No,
But
and,
that was a nice tournament. They had what I remember about it is they had the bar next door,
Yeah.
and on Saturday night it was very loud
Yes.
with live music, and
Right.
people would complain about the bar, but every time you played in the tournament, you knew Saturday night they had a live band. It was going
Yes.
to be loud,
Right.
but people kept coming back to play in the tournament. So
Yeah, that was a very popular tournament. Yeah, that we held
Yes.
at the Holiday Inn in Leominster. Yeah, and again, you made your mark actually back certainly in the 80s. You dominated. You were one of the dominating figures, chess figures, in New England. And of course, you had this rivalry with John Curto. In fact, you had a long rivalry with John Curto, and a lot of our viewers probably never heard of John Curto. What can you tell our viewers about John Curto and your rivalry with John?
Yeah, so John, it was very interesting. There were certain players that he played a lot. So before me, he played a lot of games with Jack Peters, about 43 games. So Jack was around 2,400, I want to say, when he moved to Los Angeles, California in the summer of 1976. And I know in an interview, Jack had said he was sick of playing John. He played him 43 times.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up playing him 68 times. And, when I did the article about John for Chess Life magazine, I listed some of the players he had played a lot of games with, like Joe Fang, Igor Feugl, Alexander Ivanov, etc. I know Lou Mercuri, who I saw after that. I forgot to mention him in the article. He's a FIDE master. He also played John 43 times, but he played a lot of these people over and over. So it was very tricky playing him because he had a very narrow repertoire. But the problem was we're playing on a board next to each other for years, so we know each other's repertoire inside out. So it's very tricky in that situation for either player to try to come up with a new wrinkle or some new opening idea that the other player hasn't seen. So it was kind of an interesting rivalry that kind of evolved over the years. And then around 1982, maybe the fall of 82, I went on a good streak, and I didn't, I think I had 12 wins, no losses, and a bunch of draws for the next few years. I know I had that little chart, George, in Understanding Your Chess. I had like a chart kind of showing how the rivalry kind of evolved. But John, was a very interesting player. He, in 1976, he went down to the World Open. He drew Walter Brown in a nice game where he could have been winning. He had some nice games. We beat another IM, Danny Kopech, very easily a couple games. He played all these guys over and over again. I'm trying to think, another FIDE master, David Grigo from Rhode Island. He had a lot of interesting games with him. And John, in the 60s too, he beat Robert Byrne in a nice game, grandmaster. So, he could play, and he just, chose to stay in New England. And it was a very interesting challenge just preparing for him. But it was good preparation because when I went and started playing in these New York internationals, the experience of playing him really, really helped out. I was able to make these IM norms very quickly, and I hadn't really played that much outside of New England. So, it obviously did something as far as preparing me to play good players, right? So, because that first international in 1981, I think I lost one game to Dmitry Gurevich, who became a grandmaster a few years later. But I remember I drew Roman Djindjashvili, a grandmaster, Andy Soltis, a grandmaster. I think I beat Walter Morris. He's an international master.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and beat some other players. And so it was good practice, playing these players in New England and playing John in particular.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that book, Understanding Your Chess. That was your first chess book. When did you write that book, Understanding Your Chess?
So that book, George, was published in 2004. And the idea of that happened because Jerry Donahue, who he was a local master. He was coming up, he played in a tournament in Sturbridge in 2002 in the summer, in August. So when I originally stopped playing in 1989, I hadn't visited a chess tournament in years. So I visited that tournament, and John was there. Uh-huh. And years later, he said, "I knew when I saw you liked it. You were coming back."
Oh, wow. Wow.
It was kind of funny. But what happened was Jerry had, a version of ChessBase that he showed me. And I said, "Oh, this is very interesting," and it had some rudimentary engine. But I said, "Let me get this." And what I did is I actually put my games into ChessBase, all 2,400 of them. So that took some number of months because I had to go through score sheets and figure out the right dates. And, of course, I have all the chess horizons from day one. So I was able to use that and kind of validate some information from there and from Harold Ondis's Boston Globe column, because I gave Harold and John a lot of my games they published in the column there. I was the main source of games for him. So he had published a lot of my games there. So I was able to piece things together. So originally I intended that to be kind of a one book, and then I was going to come back and play. But the book did so well that Gambit said, "Oh, you got to write another one." So then I wrote How to Beat 1D4, which was a black repertoire book focusing on the Queen's Gambit decline for black. So that came out in 2005. So my coming back to playing kind of got derailed a bit because I kept writing these books. So then I published Chess Explained, The Timing of Sicilian, I think in 2006. Then Chess Explained, The Queen's Gambit Declined was 2007. And then Play the Najdorf was 2010. And the Najdorf was very interesting because George, what happened is from 1978 to 1989 with black, I only lost one game as black in the Najdorf, and it was a game that you had on your show about a year ago. You had Patrick Wolf demonstrate the game from the 1984 Mass Open. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a funny line that's actually unsound for white, and I went astray. And I could have made a draw. I was a half point behind going into the last round, and so I made a blunder, and Patrick won a nice game. But that was actually the only game I lost in the Najdorf in something like 12 years. So,
Wow.
so I had a very good score with it, including against former world champion Mikhail Tal. I drew in 1988. In the 1988 National Open in Chicago, we ended up tying for first, but I had an interesting game in the Najdorf with Tal there too. So then what happened is I took a little bit of break from the book writing, and as you mentioned, George, back in 2021, I wrote Modern Chess Opening Repertoire for White, and this was an opening book that tried to look at the repertoire for White that the good players play when they're not playing the main line against all openings. So when you look at what people call the big four openings, right? E4, the main defense is one E5 for black, and that typically leads to the Roy Lopez or the Joko Piano or the Scotch game. They can play one E6, the French defense. They can play one C5, the Sicilian defense, or they can play one C6, the Caro-Kann defense. So those are pretty much known as the big four openings. So the repertoire involved looking at the E4, E5 and playing Bishop C4 on move 2 to avoid the Petrov and really get into a Joko Pianissimo, the quiet game. And that is an opening still played today in the Canada tournament going on right now in Toronto. You saw a couple interesting games involving Nakamura. Caruana also plays it a lot, and all the players there. And then against the French defense, it has the Tarrasch variation. That's when White plays knight d2 on move 3. And against the Caro-Kann, it does the advanced variation with e5 on move 3 that's preferred by the top players. They follow up with knight f3 and bishop e2. It's known as the short variation after the English GM and World Championship challenger Nigel Short, who played Kasparov for the World Championship back in 1995, I believe, right, George? Or was it 93? Yeah, 93, and Anand was 95.
Yes.
So, and then against the Sicilian, what I did was I played, if black plays in the Sicilian after e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, we play bishop b5, attacking the knight. That's called the Rossolimo variation. And if black plays d6 on move 2, we do bishop b5 check. That's the Moscow variation. And if black does e6 on move 2, we were playing the move c3. So we were transposing to an Alapin or c3 Sicilian where black has committed his pawn to e6. And against minor lines in the Sicilian, we kind of go into the main lines, and I give lines against that. And also I cover all the other choices for black, the 11 or so openings, right? The Pirc defense, the modern defense, the Alekhine defense, the Nimzovich defense, 1b6, the Fianchetto, and so forth. And that book did very well because people like these repertoire books where they have one volume and it kind of gives them a repertoire to follow. And so what happened then is I wanted to do another book last year, and I wanted to do something a little different because the previous 5 books had been opening books. So I thought, let me try doing a book on tactics. So I talked to Graham Burgess, the editor at Gambit, and we came up with the idea of doing a tactics book, but the 1001 Deadly Chess Puzzles. But the idea, George and Mike, was that this book would be completely new. So a lot of these tactics books, they look at problems that people have seen before, famous positions from World Championship matches or candidates matches. Writing this book, what I did is using ChessBase and The Week in Chess, which is a weekly download by Mark Crowther in England, who does a fantastic job, compiling all these games and putting out a database every week. I don't know how he does it. And looking at the games and identifying tactics and using that as the source for the puzzles. So for most players, unless you're an active professional player and you're downloading these games and looking at them every week, for most players, and I'm sure some of these positions have occurred in chess magazines in Europe and so forth, but 99% of the positions should be new. They should be positions that nobody has, the typical club player will never have seen any of these positions. So they're all from recent games where the players both have a FIDE rating of 2200 and above, and the, uh, the puzzles are designed to kind of improve your skills as you go along. So one thing that I did, I talk about this a bit in the introduction, George. The first few chapters have tests that go with them. So it starts out, there's elementary puzzles that are relatively straightforward, and then there's a test. Then I have checkmate puzzles followed by a test, intermediate puzzles with a test, and then the fourth chapter is forks, pins, and loose pieces, and then I have a test there too. But what I do is I make the puzzles to kind of get you ready for the test a little bit harder, so that you have to work harder, and the tests are maybe a sliver easier. And then the book ends with what I call advanced puzzles that are really for master level players. And then the very last chapter, chapter 6, is deadly puzzles, which are very challenging puzzles. And I point out in the book that, I'm not expecting the typical club player to solve these, but if they get one or two of the ideas needed for the puzzle, they can consider that a success. So it's a big, thick book here. It's about 301 pages here. If I put it
Wow,
on its
that is
side,
thick.
it's kind of a meaty, beefy book. And so far, people seem to like the book. I did a book signing at the Metro West Chess Club in Framingham a couple weeks ago that was very well attended. We had about 40 people, and some people had already downloaded the book from the Gambit website with the Gambit Studio app that they have. And you can also buy the book as a Kindle version too. And their books now, when you download these books as a Kindle, you can actually click on the diagrams, and it brings up a Lichess chessboard. So when you're looking at it on the Kindle, you can actually see a diagram and manipulate it. So it's actually kind of fun to read it that way too. So I know myself, I have a few chess books that I have both as a paper copy, and I have them, as an app book too. So that's becoming a popular thing too for people to do.
So you've emphasized how important tactics are. I'm thinking of the German master. What was it? Richard Teichmann. You remember the quote from Teichmann, the German master?
Right.
Well, he said that chess is 99% tactics. Yeah.
Right.
And
it's really true.
You do agree that actually you cannot become a good chess player without knowing how to play tactically well, knowing how to play tactically.
Exactly, George. It's very difficult, and this comes up all the time. I have students who they think their tactics are good. Sometimes they'll look at these tactics books and they can solve the puzzles, or they'll go to some of these online sites and they can solve some of the puzzles. But the problem is, they can't solve the puzzles when they appear in their game, right? So the problem is, when you're playing a game, there's not a neon sign next to the board that says white to play and win here. There's a tactic. I want you to really look hard now and find a winning tactic.
Here's a pin, figure it out.
Exactly, right.
Right, so the key is that you have to, every time you play, you have to play as though there is a tactic in the position. You have to have that mentality that every game you play, every move is a puzzle, and there might be some kind of subtle tactic there that you need to be alert for. So that's what these books are good for. When you look at these books, it's like any kind of training. When you do it by repetition, let's say you go through the book, and this is not a book you're going to read in a weekend. This is a book that for a club player, let's say somebody's rated USCF 1600 to 2000, it's going to take them 2 or 3 months to get through this book, George and Mike. They're not going to It's not a book you're going to read quick and get anything out of it. You really need to look at the puzzles, try to think about them and solve them without peeking, and only do a few at a time. Do 10 or 20. Don't try to do the whole book in, one sitting. And it's also a book where if you really sit and you concentrate on the positions, you're not watching TV in the background or listening to music or anything like that, you'll get a lot more out of it if you really try to focus, just as you do when you're playing a chess game. So the idea is really to try to simulate the conditions of when you're playing a tournament game over the board. If you can do that when you look at my book or any of these chess books, that's going to help you much better. It's going to be much better time spent in trying to improve your play.
Well, Jim, you are known as one of the greatest tactical players that New England has ever seen. I mean, You excelled at tactics, and it actually it made you a much stronger player because you know it. Now you actually have. You're going to present to our viewers a game that you played, let's see, a little more than 40 years ago, 1983. You played against a Massachusetts legend, a legendary player who just passed away last year by the name of Murray Turnbull, National Master Murray Turnbull. He just passed away April of 2023, and you thought this game would be very, very interesting for our viewers, our Chess Chat viewers. And this was played actually at the Harry Nelson Pillsbury Memorial Tournament in Watertown, the Armenian Center in Watertown in December of '83. And I thought we would present this game that you wanted us to present to our Chess Chat viewers. And in this game against, actually, I think we may have a photo of Murray Turnbull in our files that actually maybe our director can show Murray. What can you tell our viewers about Murray Turnbull? I mean, he became a legend in the state.
Yeah, so Murray was a very interesting character. I first met Murray when I first started playing, George. I played at the, there was actually a chess club in Needham at the library that lasted maybe a year or two. But then there was a club in Waltham that met at the Waltham Public Library on Main Street in Waltham. And the club is still around. It was playing at a
we see a
office
photo of Murray with the straw hat.
95.
Yep, there's a Murray, yeah.
And,
Play the
and
chess
the club
master,
is
too.
looking for a new site. So Murray would actually come to this club in Waltham. They had kind of a ladder system we would play. So Murray would come to the tournament after the game and play 5-minute with me in the back room. So he was actually the first, what we'll call candidate master strength player that I played a lot of 5-minute with. So I used to play Murray there. And then when I was in college in 1979 to 1983 at Boston University, I would play him. There were a couple coffee houses in Cambridge, in Central Square, Harvard Square. We could meet, and I'd have a salad, and we would play some games, and for a couple hours. So what happened was he ended up playing in Harvard Square at the chess tables they had outside of the French Bakery Cafe there, and he did this for years and years, since probably 1983, I think, and on. And so when I would visit Harvard Square years later, when I was in the area, I would stop in to watch him play. So he'd see me, and he's like, "Oh, Jim, we got to play a few games. Sit down and play." So he'd be playing people for $1 a game. Then I think it became $2, and then I'm not sure if it went up higher than that. So I would play him, and of course, win the games. So people would be watching, and I'd hear people behind me going, "Who's that guy? How come he doesn't have to pay?" So I'd win a few games. I'd say, "Murray, you got some paying customers. I've got to take off." So I would go, but it was always kind of funny to play him. But one of the funny stories I can tell you about him playing there was he at the tables there were these trees in that little area outside the restaurant, and there were pigeons that would sit in the trees, and the pigeons, would relieve themselves, like sometimes on him or his chessboard. So he had a squirt gun. And if a pigeon landed above him, he would squirt the pigeon with the squirt gun. I thought it was pretty clever to come up with that. But
wow.
But he had a blast out there, and he did that for almost 30 years, I want to say. At least 25 years. So,
Murray was one of a kind. Really.
Yeah, he was a funny character, very much like Jude Akers kind of does the same thing down in New Orleans. I think out in California too. I think there's a couple people that do this type of thing, but it's just one of those things,
Okay. Well, I think we're ready to present your game against Murray from 1983. Okay. And Murray had white in the game you played at the Pillsbury Memorial. And how did Murray open the game? What was his opening move? He played the D4?
Yep.
Okay.
Correct, yep.
And how did you respond to Murray's opening move?
So I believe I played knight f6 in this game, right?
You did, yes. Knight f6 is what you played. Okay. Now, what did Murray do for his next move? Did he play c4?
Did he do knight f3?
No, he played bishop g5.
Oh, he did bishop g5. Okay, that's right. He was doing the Trompovsky attack.
Yeah, this is known as the Trompovsky attack. Named after, actually, Trompovsky was a Brazilian player. Octavio Brazil. He goes way back. Trompovsky goes way back, many years. And now, what did you do in response to his bishop g5?
So this was probably, I think with this game, was it C5? I
C5
did?
is what you, yeah, you played C5. Okay, so the C pawn attacks the D pawn. And now
Yeah, he must
Murray
have-
actually captured your knight
Captured.
on F6, bishop takes F6. Okay, now how did you recapture? You got a choice here of
Yeah,
recapturing.
here I took with the G pawn, I believe, capturing towards
Yep.
the center.
G takes F6 is what you did.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. I looked in the database.
Yes.
That happened 1,500 times compared to 200 times for E takes
Okay.
bishop. And I've only ever seen and only played with the E pawn.
Oh, okay.
Turns out that's wrong.
That's wrong.
apparently.
So G takes
Well,
F6.
Yeah,
already
taking
learned
with the
something.
G
You learned
pawn,
something.
yeah, taking towards the center seems better just because you get the half-open G file for your rook, and you keep your E pawn in the center also. So you have an
Right.
extra center pawn there.
Okay.
And what did he do here? Did he push with D5 or?
No.
He plays C3.
C3.
He played.
Okay.
He plays C3. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
And you see it now? Are you seeing actually our board?
Yeah, I'm seeing the diagram.
You see the diagram? Okay, C3.
Yeah.
Now, here is where you played Queen B6. You now have a
Yep.
threat with Queen B6. You're threatening to take on the pawn on B2, for one thing.
Right. So the idea of this pawn is just, for the, the typical beginners looking at this game, right? White has exchanged his dark squared bishop for the black knight. So
Yep.
that's left him slightly vulnerable in the dark square. So by moving the queen out to B6, you put some pressure on White's pawn on B2 there because you're threatening to capture it. And incidentally, you also protect your pawn on C5. So it's a sensible move there.
Right. Now, here is where actually Murray protected that B pawn by doing what? He played Queen D2. All right.
Yep.
Now, could he have played the Queen to C2? Allowing the knight the possibility of being deployed to D2. But Murray played Queen D2. And now
Yep.
you responded with D5. You play the pawn to
right, taking the
D5.
center. Yep.
Yep. Good.
So all I'm trying to do here is just grab the center. I'm getting ready to develop my light squared bishop or play my knight to C6, I think is coming soon.
Okay. Now, Murray's sixth move, he played G3.
Yep.
So it's-
this was interesting. I expected him to play E3 and develop that way, but I think he thought that he could put some pressure on the D5 pawn by fianchettoing his bishop to the G2 square. So this is a little slow, as we'll see coming up here.
Right. Okay.
So what did I do? Knight
Knight-
C6
yes.
maybe?
Knight C6, because now you have a threat. You're putting pressure on that D pawn with three ways. With the
Yep.
so you're threatening to win a pawn here. So he has to. Well, yes. Now, does he defend that pawn on D4, or is it something else? No, he chooses not to play E3, which would
Right.
defend the pawn.
Bishop G2 is a little
says-
bit of development, a little
Yeah.
bit of a
You're right.
counter threat.
Yeah,
Because-
he decided to counterattack the D5 pawn. Yep.
Right, so he's attacking your unprotected D pawn. And now here's where you continue. You took on D4 with your C pawn. C takes D4 was what you played.
Yep.
All right. Now, what's Murray doing in response to this?
Also, C takes D4
Yeah, he
opens up
recaptures
the
the pawn,
square
yep.
for the knight.
All right, so he took back C takes D4. All right, so it's your move now. How are you going to continue here now? Well, you decided to play E5, the pawn to E5.
Right.
So we
what-
now have you're
Right. So
you're
what's
attacking that
going
pawn
on
again.
here is, yeah, it's a funny situation where it looked like maybe I would capture the D pawn and then maybe White could take my D pawn. But by playing E5, suddenly I'm threatening to bring this bishop out to B4. And then when White interpolates his knight on the C3 square, I can take the pawn on D4. So what I'm trying to do is say, White's conceded the bishop pair in the opening. So as black, I'm trying to open the position as quickly as possible and maybe get my bishop to the B4 square and put a lot of pressure on White's position because his king is still stuck in the center here.
Right. Okay. Here is now where Murray played knight C3. Now he has pressure on your D pawn.
Yep.
All right. Now, how did you respond to that? Well, what you did was you came with the bishop to B4, pinning that knight.
Yep. So
All
now
right.
I've pinned the knight So now e takes d4 is a big threat on my part.
Okay. So he doesn't like your bishop on b4, so he puts the question to your bishop by playing
Right,
e3.
he's going to kick that bishop away. Yep.
Right, exactly. And of course, you have no choice. You decide you're going to capture on c3 with the bishop. Bishop takes c3. That's
Right,
your,
and the idea of capturing there is he recaptured with the pawn. If he retakes with the queen, I can just capture his pawn on d4.
on d4, right.
Big
So,
lead in development. So he took with the pawn. I
so b
believe.
takes c3 was Murray's move. Now, how did you continue now? Well, wait a minute. You have a pawn under attack on d5. So
I think I just defended it, right?
You defended
Bishop
it.
e6.
Bishop
Yep.
e6. You defended that pawn simply by playing bishop e6. Okay, it's now Murray's 12th move. What does he do? He plays
Knight f3.
knight f3.
Yep.
Okay, so he
Yep.
develops that.
And
Okay,
he's defending his d4 pawn with that. So then I think I kicked him with e4 if I'm correct here.
no, actually, what you did is you actually redeployed this knight on c6 to a5
Oh, I played knight
because
a5
now you have a
immediately.
threat.
Okay.
Now you have.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So
fork
now I'm
right here.
threatening knight b3, forking
Right.
the queen and the rook.
So you're threatening a fork of the queen and the rook. So what he does now, what does he do here? Well, he played
Queen
Queen-
h6, which
Yeah.
chess.com's weak engine liked.
Oh,
but
really?
It seems to take the queen right out of the game.
So actually, the chess.com, the computer,
They like that move,
likes
yeah.
that move.
Maybe there aren't a lot of good choices.
Oh,
But
right. Okay. Now
Yeah,
what
so this
Jim
is the
did now.
position. This is the position, George, that I talk about in understanding your chess, where I think I thought for about 40 or 45 minutes here. So
Oh, wow.
the reason I selected this game, I was trying to pick a game that had a long calculation, and this was one of the games with the longest calculation. I was trying to visualize the position in my head about 11 moves from now, as you'll see in a second here. So now I think I played e4, right, kicking his
Yes,
knight.
you did. E4 attacks the knight. Okay.
Jim, is that how far in the future you can visualize 10 or 12 moves?
So depending on the complexity of the position, I can go farther than that if the position's relatively simple, but it gets kind of complicated. And of course, the top super GMs, they can visualize the board flawlessly the whole game, so. But at that time, this was around 1983, that period, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, I could visualize pretty well. So, but this was, as you'll see, it's a very complicated position. So it was a lot of work trying to make sure I'm not just dropping material or something coming up here. So what this move does, it's actually an invitation for white to actually win both of my rooks. So it's actually a double rook sacrifice. So as we go along here, you'll see it's kind of interesting.
All right. So what Murray did, move
takes
14, he
F6.
took. Queen
Yep.
takes F6. Yep.
Yep, and then I just take his knight on
Yes.
F3.
He takes F3. You got the knight. And now Murray's next move is actually queen.
Takes the rook on H8.
Wins that
Yep.
rook. Queen takes H8 to check, forcing the king to move. And the king moves to, you went to E7, right?
E7, yep.
E7, right. Okay. All right.
Well, he
Right.
took the bait and cashed in the
Right,
material,
and
but
because I'm attacking the queen, he's got to take my rook there,
Right.
and that's what leads to kind of the interesting position here.
Yes. All right. It's Murray's
we,
move. No, it's your move. And
Now it's my move, so I
yeah.
take this guy on
Right.
G2, I
Right.
believe, right?
You take F takes G2.
Attacking the rook. Yep.
Attacking the rook. Okay.
and
So
the
right
rook,
now it's a double exchange sacrifice. In other words, white has two rooks and black has a knight and a bishop. So white does rook G1,
Right.
saving his rook, and now I come in with the queen, right, to B2.
Yes.
that's right.
Now you come to Queen B2, attacking the rook on A1. Okay.
Yep.
Threatening that. That has to save itself. That rook on A1 has to save itself.
Limited choices, so it
Right.
goes to D1.
So he's going to move his rook to D1.
Right. Exactly. That's the only move. It's a forced move. Yeah, that was the only
Yep.
move. And now, what did you do now? You took.
Now the knight C4, I hope.
Nope.
Well, I think you took this pawn on C3 first.
Oh, I
You-
checked
you,
him first. That's
you
right.
took you took Queen takes G3 check. Okay. And now what he did was actually
He's got to
block.
play
Has to
rook
block it.
D2. Yep.
He blocked rook D2.
And this must be the bishop D7 then.
Yes, a very good move. Yes, I like
Okay.
this move. Yes.
So this was the key move, yes. In other
Yes.
words, if knight c4, white can take my pawn on b7 check. So way back when I played knight a5,
Yes.
inviting queen h6, I had to look at this position.
Oh, really?
and
Wow.
Try to figure out what the heck was going on.
Right.
And the idea here is that I'm trying to get the bishop to a4 so that I can play queen c1 check and answer rook d1 with queen
Mate.
takes rook on d1 checkmate. So
Mate.
bishop d7 is kind of the star move
And
here.
yes.
And we
Yeah.
won't go over all the variations, but in the book I give, what happens if white, plays, queen h8, queen g8, various moves. But I'll
Right.
let you go ahead and play white's move here.
So one question, knight a4, or a5 was just clearance of the c6 square.
So the idea was to, it had the threat of knight b3, forking the rook on a1
Right.
and the white queen on d2. And also coming into this nice c4 square where there's a hole there because it can't be controlled by a white pawn. So we call that c4 square a hole. But yes, exactly, just to exploit white's weak pawn structure because he lost these tempi, right, playing a3, kicking my bishop, and then he recaptured the bishop on c3 with the pawn on b2. So that left these holes in his position on the b3 square and the c4 square. So that's what I'm trying to exploit with this whole combination.
Okay.
Okay. Now Murray realizes his queen is out of play.
He's in a bit of trouble.
He's in trouble with, so he plays the queen to b8. Okay. So he's able.
Yep, so now he's trying to get to e5 and put a check on e5 there.
Yes.
And hopefully here's where I played knight c4, I hope.
Which stops that. You play knight c4,
Right.
which stops any check with the
Controls
queen on
e5
e5.
square, yep.
And
Now he
also
still
you're
has to
threatening.
defend his rook.
Yeah. So
Yep.
yeah. So he only has one move to save it. He has to bring
Queen
the
F4, yep.
he brings the queen back to f4, which
Yep.
protects the rook. Yeah.
And this is where I did bishop a4.
Excellent move. Bishop a4.
So this was the position I looked at, George, back when I played knight a5. So that was what, move 11 or something when I played knight a5?
Move 12. You
Move
played
12
knight a5 on
and-
move 12. Yes. Right.
What move is this now? Like
Where this bishop a4 is move 21.
21? Okay, yeah, so that's pretty good. So that's 9 moves
9
later.
moves
So this
ago,
was
yes.
the position I was looking at, and I saw that I'm going to win this rook on d1, and I'm going to end up with a knight and bishop against a rook, but I'm going to be able to generate a passed pawn on the queen side very quickly. So I consider this winning in my head.
Right.
Because I think white has to play f3 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
here.
he has
Yeah.
to create an escape square for
that's
the,
what
the
happened.
king. F3 is what he played. And now
I haven't
you
looked
carry
at
out
this
your
game
plan.
I haven't looked at this game in a couple months since I
All
sent
right.
it to you, so that's why if I'm not rattling off the moves, yeah.
No, but you carry out your plan of
Yep.
queen c1 check.
Correct.
All
Yeah.
right.
And now, of course, white has to move his
Only
king
one-
to f2.
Moves the king f2, and now you take the rook.
I take the rook on d2. Yep.
with the queen. Okay,
the
queen
queen,
takes d2 is what you play. Okay, how does Murray continue here? Murray must realize he must. Does he realize he's losing this, or is he still hoping to salvage this? Yeah.
I'm trying to think. When I spent all that time, he actually played the part of the game very quickly. I was
Quickly?
kind of surprised because you would think that if you're playing me and I'm taking a
Yeah.
long time looking at a combination, you might want to double or triple check something. But
Right.
he just played fairly quickly, as I recall. I was surprised how quickly he played, but
Yeah.
yeah, he didn't spend any near the amount of time I did. So.
Okay, so now Murray.
It seems like he could maybe try to, do some checks, but the bishop
No.
could drop back. So in the end, he just traded off the queen.
Yeah, he trades Mike because he doesn't really have a good check there.
Right.
Just one
and
check.
if he leaves the queen on the board, I've got threats on the d4 pawn and
Yeah.
so forth. So he trades and
Yeah.
hopes he can salvage this endgame. So I recapture the queen on d2 with
Yeah.
the knight.
Knight takes d2. Yeah, that's what's it. Okay, what does Murray do now? Murray actually.
25, rook c1.
Okay, so now he's
Right, he
ready to
comes
come
over,
down
so
the rook
he-
c7 check. Yeah.
Correct, yeah. So he says, I don't have to take this pawn on g2 right away. I can try to get some counterplay with
Right.
rook c7 check and then rook takes b7. So then I think I bring my knight back to c4, right,
Yes.
to
Yeah.
block
A nice
the,
blocker. Nice stops any penetration
Yep.
with the rook.
and it also attacks the pawn on b3.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So he protected that pawn, but
Right.
it
With rook
ties up a...
c3, and now what do I do, b5 here?
Yes.
B5.
B5. Nice.
And I want to point something out to people here that's very important.
Yes.
That's missed a lot. But when you see a knight and a bishop like that, I want to make sure people notice that when the knight and bishop are on the same color like that, they control different color squares. So the knight is controlling 8 dark squares from that position
Yeah.
to go with the light squared bishop. So when you look at the basic checkmates, right, when you have king, bishop, and knight against king, you're supposed to move your bishop and knight in what's called a W. And you very often have the knight and the bishop, just like you see here, 2 squares apart. So it's a very powerful formation because the bishop and the knight are controlling D2, C2, and the B2 squares. So you'll see here quickly how hopeless White's position is in just a second. So
Yeah.
what does he do? Take my pawn
He
on
took the
G2
pawn.
finally?
Yep. King takes
So he can try to
G2.
get his king over, and then I must have played A5 to get
That's
past
what you did.
pawn.
A5. You're ready
They're
to
coming.
advance. A5.
And
What-
what's he do? E4 to
He
try
played
to get some
E4,
counterplay?
28 E4.
All right. So you
Yeah,
play
and I just ignore it and play B4, I hope.
Yep. You played B4, attacks the rook. Yep. And he now has, he took.
He doesn't have a lot of choices.
Yeah, his choices are very limited. A takes B4 is what he did, and of course you just recaptured with your A pawn. A takes
Correct,
B4.
right, attacking the rook. Yep, so the rook really has
Yeah.
only 1 square to retreat here to C1.
That's right. There's only 1 square for that rook. Rook C1. Okay.
And I just
30.
keep pushing the pawn.
Right. You play
Pass
B3.
pawns must be pushed, right? With
Pawn, yes.
B4 to
Pass
B3.
pawns must be pushed. That's good to know, right? And now what did he do here?
Well, he got his attack rolling.
I think he took my pawn on D5, right? But then I just played B2.
Right.
Yeah.
You play B2, and this is where he realized he cannot save it. Even if he plays the rook to
Right.
B1, he's
Well,
gonna
right.
It's gonna cost the material. Yeah.
Right,
end the game.
I'll play bishop C2.
This
But,
and that.
Right.
And if he takes the knight,
You queen. You
you
can't.
queen,
Yep,
and then
And this is
then I
then
can
there's
check,
check
check on
with a
C2
fork,
and
yeah.
I take the rook, correct? Yep, very good, Mike. Yep, and then
So
the queen
let's
for
show the
nothing.
final position where he resigned. Your pawn is on B2. Yep. Bishop's here. So in this position, Murray, this was out on after your 30-second move, he resigned here in this position.
Yep,
So this was a very instructive game, and you sacrificed 2 rooks, and you actually took a calculation. You had to actually calculate long on these two sacrifices here. Yeah.
right, so it's always dangerous to play a game like that, right? Because if you miscalculate, you just lose the game, right?
Right. Exactly.
But you can tell, like a lot of times when you're playing, some intuition kind of factors into it. So in this particular game, White took my knight on F6, right, without being prompted. So he loses maybe a half tempo there. His queen being on D2 is on a vulnerable square, right? It's on the same color square as my dark squared bishop.
Right.
Then he plays A3 to pick my knight on B4. I take his knight, he retakes with the pawn. So I'm picking up these kind of half tempi, and I felt like Black has picked up a tempi, maybe a tempo and a half. And that kind of justified this whole idea of knight A5, and then the subsequent sacrifice with E4, and then queen takes F6, E takes knight on F3. So a lot of times, George, when you look at these positions and you're trying to calculate, it's a situation, and Mike, I'm sure you've seen this too, you've got to look at the beginning of the game and kind of make a judgment of, is my sacrifice kind of justified? And in this case, I said it is, because White lost this time, and rather than White developing conservatively with something like E3 and knight F3 or knight E2, he played this G3 and bishop G2 idea, which is a little slow, right? Because it takes 2 tempi to get the bishop to G2. So that's why I broke open the center with E5.
Okay.
So sometimes, you can calculate lines exactly, but a lot of times it's just intuition and just having a feel for the game and how the position seems it should be. You can't calculate everything all the time. So I just felt intuitively that I should be able to try to break open the center and something positive should happen. But like I said, that specific position, when I played knight A5, that's where I really had to look at this queen sacrifice. And the moves there were fairly forcing. It was just a question of trying to keep it straight in your head and make sure you're not missing some elementary tactic. And then, George, like you said, the big idea was when I played bishop D7 instead of knight C4, avoiding a queen check on the B7 square. That was kind of the key move that I had to find there to find a way to win the game.
Yeah. No, well, this is good. We thank you for presenting
Yeah,
this game to us.
I think I feel like I just got
A lesson.
like a lesson.
A
yeah.
lesson, very valuable lesson. Yeah. Now, Jim, you are watching like many other players. The candidates tournament that's going on in Toronto. I
Yes.
want to get your thoughts on the candidates. You have a prediction as far as who will win that candidates tournament and be the challenger for the World Championship? Do you have any?
Yeah, so we've just finished 4 rounds because today is a rest day. But before the tournament, I thought that Caruana and Nepo were the what we'll call the co-favorites. With Nepo, it's funny. A lot of the people predicting didn't have him as a favorite, but it's hard to bet against him because he's won the last 2 candidates tournaments, and once he gets a roll going, he gets on a roll. His play is very we'll call it effortless and intuitive. He's a very natural player. Once he gets on a roll and things are going his way, they tend to keep going his way. So that's why I considered him a co-favorite along with Caruana, who's, Caruana's results have been very consistent the last few years. He's obviously the second highest rated player in the world after Carlsen, and he's going to be there. He won the candidates back a few years ago, and then he actually tied for first, right, George? The year that
Yes.
Karyakin won. Karyakin won on tiebreak. So Caruana's kind of won the tournament twice too. So it made sense that those two are the co-favorites. And then I figured Nakamura would be a factor too, simply because he had a big, I think he was riding like a 47-game unbeaten streak
Yes.
in classical games or something going into this. So he'll be there just because of his skill and his experience. So the three of them are a kind of what we'll call, the three favorites. I'll give Caruana and Nepo maybe a shade more of a favorite than Nakamura, but he'll be there at the end. And after that, it's very much a free-for-all because a lot of the other players, when you look at Gukesh and Prague, these are young players, right? They're 17 and 18, so their ratings are very volatile. Their strength is very volatile. They could have a big breakthrough in this tournament. Even Vidit, who's older than them, right? I think he's like 28 or 29. Won the nice game against Nakamura. Then he stumbled a bit, but really, it's a very interesting tournament because any of these players can do well. So even the lowest rated player, right? Abasov, he's lower rated than these players, but he had some great result in the World Cup, and he's shown he can beat these guys. So I don't really think there's anybody that people should say, oh, this person is going to finish near the bottom, right? And of course, Ferrugia too will be right up there. So really, anything can happen. This is actually one of the most interesting fields, I think, in a long time, because I don't see anybody that I look at and say, oh, they're going to finish at the bottom or near the bottom. Any of these guys could get hot and win the tournament. So it should be a good tournament.
Well, I'm impressed with the fact that in this 8-player field, we have 3 players from India. It just shows you what has happened in the country of India. They've developed a great number of strong players that we've not seen before. I'm impressed by that.
Yeah, and these players are super strong. And then you have Barry Gassi too, who's not in the tournament obviously, but he's obviously a very strong player. But I believe he's. They just announced the other day the participants in the Grand Chess Tour, and I believe if he's not like a full member, he's playing in some of the events, so they'll have a strong presence there too. So that should be interesting this year too.
He just made it to 5th in the rating list, in the live rating list this past week.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now I want to get actually your feedback on our star here at Wachusett Chess Club from years ago, who's now a student at Stanford, Carissa Yip. You no doubt know of Carissa Yip.
Oh yes. Yep.
Who's the U.S. Women's Champion. Do you have any predictions as far as the future for Carissa Yip? Because I think she has great potential. I mean, being a 2-time U.S. Women's Champion, the current one. Do you have any predictions
I
for her?
see a very bright future for her. She seems very talented tactically. It's really going to depend, George, like it does with all these kids, like if they pursue chess full time or do they go on and do something else for a career is really kind of the key thing. But no, her play has been fantastic, and there's no reason to think that won't continue if she keeps playing.
Right. So, Mike, you have any questions for Jim?
Jim, now that you've written so many books and you were sort of semi-retired and you haven't been playing in a while, are you a full-time author now, or will you play again? What do you think?
No, I'm hoping to play again, hopefully later this year, early next year. But you know, it's one of these. You know, when I first came back to play in 2004, I hadn't played in 15 years, and when I started playing, I wrote the book, you know, as preparation to come back and play. And then, of course, I got extremely busy in my career, the busiest I'd ever been, and I was writing another book. So, like, whenever I get all geared up to play, like, life intervenes and I get involved in something else. It's really kind of too bad, you know, but that's just the way it is. But yeah, I am hoping to play some more, and you know, and I'll write another book at some point too. I'm not sure what about, but I'm sure we'll come up with something. You know, every time you write one of these books, you say, "Oh, it's so much effort. That's it. I'm not going to do another." But now I've written 7 of them, right?
So was
you know,
was the Deadly Puzzles a way to start training again for your return?
yeah. So one thing I noticed is because I'm so busy with other stuff. When I was a teenager and in my 20s, my tactics were much stronger, and so part of the reason I did the book was to kind of improve my own tactics. So hopefully it has that effect. Because like I said before, you know, most of the decisions you face in a chess game are tactically related. Once you get past a few beginning opening moves that you're familiar with, you have to face tactical decisions on every move. So if you can get that part of the game down, that's going to really help you get better down the road.
I've never thought of it that way. I always thought it was like thinking of a variation and trying to calculate it, but not thinking of every step of that as its own new, its own new puzzle, its own strategy.
Yeah. Well, every position that appears to be, every move is a puzzle, is a new puzzle.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to figure out what to do. Yeah.
Like you can open a book or step up to someone else's game and maybe see something right away that you don't see when you're deep into your own game, and what you're describing is the way to do that.
Now, what advice?
It's very important to do that, because even like this came up with a student a couple of weeks ago. They had a position where they made their opponent captured a piece, and they made an obvious recapture after a couple seconds, and they had an in-between move that would have won the game. So very often, even in positions where somebody captures a piece and you think it's an obvious recapture, every once in a while you have an in-between move that actually would win the game. So even obvious recaptures, you need to kind of stop for 10, 15 seconds and look and just double check that there's not something better. So this type of thing comes up all the time, and in club games all the time. I see this all the time with people, that they miss these in-between moves because they just take for granted that, oh, my opponent captured my knight, I've got to recapture. But they should look and see, maybe they have a better move than just recapturing.
Now, what advice would you give? I mean, with the study of tactics is very important. Doing these puzzles. So there's a benefit by studying these puzzles. And in fact, I think the quote in the book, you say you found the single most benefit for most chess players is studying tactics. I mean, correct. I think you state that. You don't emphasize enough how important tactics is in chess. Yeah. And there are players who don't understand how to play tactically. But then there is positional chess, which is quite different than tactics.
For that, George, I think if players, if you look at the games of the great world champions, you look at games from Fischer, Karpov, Kasparov, Anand, Carlsen, and so forth. That's beneficial too, obviously helping your positional skills.
Thank you. Well, Jim, thank you for our session with you. It was great having you on Chess Chat, and we hope to see you for a future Chess Chat. We wish you the best in your career, your chess career as a writer and player.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Mike. Have a good night.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. We'll see you all next time on Chess Chat.